Recently, a buddy of mine, his wife, contacted me and she wanted to have me make a belt for him. I haven't made a belt in a while, but I figured it'd be a good opportunity to show everyone the design process and how I make it, and the tools and the steps that it takes to make all this stuff. So I'm going to walk you through some of the key steps in design and we'll go from there, and you can watch it step by step. So thanks for watching, stay tuned. First step of making a belt is choosing the leather type you want to do. Since I'm going to be doing some hand tooling design, I'm going to use what's called a veg tan. This is typically a thicker leather, not that you would use it for upholstery. It allows you to cut designs into it and form it much easier. I like to use Tandy brand only because it's the most available in the area I'm in. There are other suppliers, but typically you have to buy in much larger quantities. So what I use is a Craftsman double shoulder, and I go in and I look at every single piece to find the best piece I can. So this piece is looking pretty good. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my wooden tool, don't know the name for it, but it basically allows you to cut strips and stuff, and I'm going to set it to 1 3/4 inches, and that's going to give me the width of the belt that I want to make. 1 3/4 inches is pretty thick for dress belts. I would usually use about 1 1/2 inches, but since this is my buddy and he wears jeans, I'm going to go with 1 3/4 inches. So we'll set that, and then we're going to go ahead and strip this out. Once you have your leather cut into a strip, we're going to measure it out so that it fits in properly. Typically what people will do is they'll give you the person's waist size, which is not actually their belt size. So this person is a 36 inch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my own waist, which I'm a 32, and I'm going to add 4 inches and a little bit of extra, and I'll show you why. Alright, so mine, I'm a 32 inch waist, 33, and we're going to end up with 37. So if we get, let's say 3 more inches for him, we're going to be at 40 inches from where the buckle lands to the hole that we're going to do. So what we want to do is make sure that the piece we cut is long enough, which it is. We got a couple extra on both sides. And we're going to mark it out, and yeah, we'll go from there. When I used to do belts a lot, I ended up making this template so I didn't have to measure it out every time. I'm going to flip the belt over and use a regular ink pen just to kind of line up my lines and figure out my spacing. Okay, so the measurement we got 40 inches, that's going to be to the holes. Now we have a wide array of holes. Typically I put 6 holes in there 1 inch apart. So we're going to measure 40 inches from the center of this. And I'm going to mark that right in the center. Once we have that mark, I also have another template that displays the hole spacing and the length of the tip after the hole. I'll lay this out. I'm not going to use these first 2 holes. I'm going to make the belt a little bit short at first because these belts have a tendency to stretch 1 inch or 2 after you use them. So I'm going to line it up with this hole right here, which would be leaving him 3 after if it stretches. Now I'm going to cut this piece. It's not completely symmetrical, and using scissors can be kind of daunting. Some people make tools for these, but I like to just try my best to stay on the line. And when I'm done with that, I'll flip the belt around, continue that. And I like to flip it back over to see if it looks okay. Now it looks like we have a little bit of a tighter angle here. I'll go in here and try and shave some of this off, but later on we can go to the belt sander and make this look a little bit better. Okay, looking a little bit better, symmetrical. Next we're going to lay out design. What you want to be aware of here is which way your belt buckles and the orientation. Another thing I hadn't did earlier is I drew out some scroll work that's going to be on the belt. This is going to be a symmetrical scroll work from the center. So first thing I have to do is find the center. Now that's not necessarily the complete center of the belt, so what I like to do is fold this back, pretend like I'm putting it on. I'm going to grab the complete center of my back, pull that away, and I'm going to mark the top center of the belt. Now that's my top center. Now it's okay to mark on the side because we'll be burnishing this and staining it later, so that mark will go away. So now we have our design location marked out, and I have this scroll work that I drew out earlier today. I'm going to lightly case the leather, which means get it wet, very lightly, so that we can transfer our design for tooling onto the belt. So the first step is you use purified water, room temp is just fine, maybe a little bit warmer is okay, and we're going to lightly spritz the belt. Once you have it sprayed down, just 2 squirts worth for the whole thing, you'll see that the color is going to darken and then it'll slowly lighten back up. So we're going to wait about a minute. I'm going to clean up this residual water and then we should be ready to transfer our pattern. Once your leather has dried, it'll look just a little bit more damp than it was originally. One of the key important things that people tend to mess up in this step is you gotta keep your hands extremely clean, and my hands are typically really dirty, so I use a pumice stone with lots of hot water and dish soap. The one thing you'll get right now is oil marks, and any sort of dirt on your hand will be transferred into leather, and that'll show up in your final design. Now, since we're going to be staining this a little bit darker, it's not as much of a concern, but it does affect on lighter stains and stuff like that. So clean your hands really well, super important. Alright, so now we have this design that I typically use, kind of stock. Draw that real quick. And we're going to find our center point on the belt. Normal belts for dudes are pulled in through the left side. So if you hold it up like this, your left side is going to have the buckle and your right side is going to have the end of the belt. We lay it down, find our center, and I've marked this design so that the center will be here, and I'll have a small little just kind of circle or oval there to take up the space to kind of break it up. And this will be symmetrical, so once I lay out the first one, I'll flip it over and I'll show you the results of the layout. Once you've drawn it all out, I like to hold one hand in, peel it back, and you'll show your design. Looks like I missed a couple lines here, so you can see that, and by not removing your hand, you can lay it back down, and it should line right back up. Looks good. Now that I got this side, I'm going to flip it back over, and you can see, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there is a slight indent of where the pen pushed through. When I run this side, there's already ink and pencil on this side, so it will press this into the leather. So it's important that you don't push nearly as hard, because this, instead of transferring just an impression, it's going to transfer ink and pencil. Now you can go back and you can erase your pencil if you'd like, if you don't want the pencil to get on there. I don't do that, I just don't push as hard. Another thing to take into consideration at this point is you've now drawn and had your hand on the piece of paper, so you'll have a little bit of debris on your palm here. So make sure that when you're doing this, either go wash your hands or don't touch the leather with this palm, or your palm print will show up. And you'll notice when I did this belt, I actually creased the piece of paper across the edge of the belt, and now that I have that, I can actually line those creases back up and it'll give me the same spacing. Now, since I didn't get my design all the way to the edge, I'm going to go ahead and push the lead all the way into a mechanical pencil, and I'm just going to lightly freehand something in here. Just very lightly, and you'll see it leaves a little mark. Alright, so now we have our design laid out. There's no time crunch to this. This will stay like this indefinitely. I've had belts that I started and never finished that have been like this for years and it'll still be there. One thing I'd recommend is not really touching the pencil side, because you can smudge that a little bit. These will all go away because we're going to use our carving knife to carve these lines. And the next step we're going to do is we're going to case the leather, or get it wetter this time, and then we're going to let it sit for a moment. So. And the key to casing leather is try and do it fast. I know everyone does it their own way. This is the way I've learned it to be the best, is I like to make it puddle up on here, and you'll see the water tends to soak in. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll roll the belt a little bit just to get the pores open to allow it to soak in a little more. I'll do this one more time just to get it wet enough, and you'll start to feel, you don't want it soaked all the way through. This is just residual water. And you don't want it soggy, you still want it a little stiff for carving. For other processes you can get a little bit wetter for forming, but this is how I like to do it for carving. I would recommend experimenting with different levels of wetness to see what you like and what works best for you. Okay, so while that dries, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen my tools, which is super important. One thing that people get wrong with leather work is they don't sharpen their tools or use the right tool for the job. So a nicely sharp knife will get you a very clean, deep edge without having to double cut, and that'll allow you to get very nice lines, and you can bevel them in with a lot of detail being pushed up to the top. Here is, I'm going to take my knife, which is a carving knife. Okay, and I've set the edge on this a long time ago on my belt sander to give me a nice sharp piece. What I'd like to use is a beveled edge with an angled tip. This will get very dull very quick cutting leather, so it's very nice and very necessary to continually strop the knife. And this is just a piece of leather with some stropping material / white polishing rouge, just kind of pressed into the leather. And what you'll do is you'll take it and apply a little bit of pressure at the angle, try and hit the angle the best, and you'll pull it back and forth. Flip it over, and what you'll get is these little lines of darker dust, and that's actually the edge. There's microscopic pieces of metal that have been left on the edge from cutting, and if you don't do this, they'll dull over, and they make your knife dull, not cut very well. So what we're doing is we're dragging the knife over, and we're work hardening those pieces until all of them come off. We have a nice long-lasting tip. Now be aware when you're done doing this, check the inside of your hand, because this is important. You're going to get whatever's on the inside of your hand on that belt while you're working it, and regardless of how careful you are, or if you put a piece of paper down, it's going to happen. So keep your hand clean. Typically this spot right here and this are going to get the dirtiest, so pay attention to that, especially because you'll be stropping out through the whole process. So just make sure you keep it clean. Now that I've cut the design that I had laid into the leather, I'm going to go ahead and tool this in. I've once again let it dry a little bit because it was cased, and I sprayed a little bit more. Now so you can see I'm a little bit wet in the center here because I've soaked all the way through, so I need to be careful when I'm tooling that. Typically I'd like to let that dry a little bit, but it's late, so I'm going to keep moving forward. When it comes to designing leather work, there's a couple little rules. If you notice all of these lines kind of stop staggered, that's one thing I'll show you in the tooling process that helps you kind of define your design and give you a better look. Another thing that's important is consistency. So you'll see that this is kind of a continuing wrapped piece, and what you want to do here is you want to kind of make sure that your design has a continuity to it. So you can see these are two little interweaving pieces. First things I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and go in here, and I'm going to set the backgrounder, which is something that lets the whole piece pop. When I do a design, I try and do the least amount of backgrounding possible, fill all these voids in that I can, because backgrounding kind of sucks. It takes a long time, and it is not fun. And typically if you have too much of it, it can kind of take over a design, and it's usually not consistent over large areas. What I have is a small case where I keep most of my commonly used tools. You can get all of these at Tandy Leather. You can make your own, you can grind them down, you can do whatever you want. I'm gonna go ahead and start tooling. I think I'll show you the results and maybe I'll go over a couple little steps.